Ridge Racer!
Ridge Racer on the PS Vita is one of the most baffling games I've ever played. It's not very common to find a game that is as good as it is incompetent, but Ridge Racer on the Vita proves to both excel at what it does best, and yet falls so short of the finish line to the point that it's almost hard to believe. Today, we'll explore what the game did right, as well as where it dropped the ball and how much its few mistakes really did affect the game as a whole. However, I think that before getting into Ridge Racer on the PS Vita, it's worth examining a little bit of Ridge Racer's outing on the PSP to see how past efforts in portable outings fared for the franchise. Specifically on the PSP, as the PS Vita is its successor, and also because this is the first time I've done a video on a Ridge Racer game, so I might as well give you people a history lesson if you're not too familiar.
The race is just about to start. The tension here at Midtown Expressway is electrifying. All right, it's time to fire up those engines. Three, two, one, go! A smooth start, not bad.
Ridge Racer PSP was a launch title for the system, releasing on day one for each territory that PSP was released on. The game was a major success and a great technical showcase for the system, boasting amazing visuals for a portable in 2004, with complex environments and car models, all running at a smooth 60 FPS with no hiccups in sight. For the time, it really was something incredible to behold, as the graphical fidelity was beyond any other portable out at the time and ran at a great frame rate, but with it came a good amount of content as well. The game had an extensive campaign that lasted over the course of several hours, making use of its full roster of 24 tracks and over 50 cars to choose from. The gameplay was really fun too, featuring a more on-rails drifting model, where letting go of the accelerator in a corner would lead to your car drifting through it at extremely high speeds. This drifting style had your car kind of go through a set path in a corner, but you had to control how much the drift lasted, as well as drift from a good position in the track to ensure that it wouldn't go wrong. When drifting, you'd fill up nitrous bottles, of which you have 3. Fill up one and you can use it for a prolonged speed boost, whether to hit top speed on the straights or drift through the corners at higher speeds than everyone else. It was an easy game to pick up and play, but left a lot of room for you to really improve your driving as you played and to find more depth over time, which for a portable game is just perfect. And it also had a fantastic soundtrack to top it all off. So, Ridge Racer's previous efforts for a Sony handheld were quite literally revolutionary for their time, providing amazing visuals and performance, alongside extremely fun gameplay, a great volume of content, and the series' trademark amazing music as usual. The reason why I thought it'd be best to make a brief stop with this game is not only because it is amazing, but because it shows the series' level of excellence within the handheld space, particularly on Sony's handhelds. And it really does show the dip in quality between previous outings and Ridge Racer on the PS Vita. For this video, we'll be using Ridge Racer on the PSP as a comparison point. And for the group of you that are familiar with Ridge Racer, I do know that Ridge Racer 2 for the PSP does exist, but given that it wasn't released in all territories, I won't be using it as a baseline. Not that it matters much anyway. Let's get into it.
How will you pass your rivals? How will you tune your machine? And what marks the moment of truth? Take all these into consideration and plan your strategy for the race. 3, 2, 1, go!
Now, before I get into ripping this game apart, we do have to be fair and give credit where credit is due. Starting with the presentation because it's the easiest thing to see. The game for the PS Vita looks great. Everything is highly detailed, the cars especially, which I'd say are some of the best car models the system has to offer, but other stuff such as the trackside details like rocks, greenery, buildings, anything that's within your vision looks nicely detailed. And alongside that, everything really pops. The game has a lot of vibrant colors, which definitely fits the vibe of Ridge Racer, and it's a look that I always preferred. But it looks even better on the Fat Vita's OLED display, which is what I'm playing it on for this video. The game really pops thanks to the color selection and overall look. It's not just a game that looks good on a technical level, but one that looks pretty to the eye. It's absolutely pleasant to look at thanks to the color choice. It gives a hand in making the game feel lively. Something that could be on the negative side for some though is that unlike its PSP counterpart, Ridge Racer Vita runs at 30 FPS rather than 60 FPS. But I assume that a lower frame rate was targeted due to the level of detail on display, and given how other games that target a similar frame rate look on the system, I would say that it's an understandable decision, though it does make me question how the game would have looked like if it targeted 60 FPS instead. Besides this, the game doesn't run at the Vita's full display resolution of 960 by 544, but that extends to a lot of games in the system, so it's not really unique for Ridge Racer, and in this game's case it leads to a pretty good battery life when playing it for a long time, so I consider it a fair trade-off. There are some slight frame rate dips that can happen, but it's never anything bad enough to where it deeply affects the gameplay experience, and if you've got a hacked Vita, it's nothing that a small overclock can't fix. The game is a technical achievement for the hardware, and I can absolutely say that. It may not look that great when blown up on a YouTube video, but it absolutely does look great when you're playing it. And let's remember that the PS Vita is a portable machine from 2011, which was 6 years before the Switch came out. For its time, it was great, and the fact that in terms of looks, it's not too far off from the 7th gen Ridge Racer games is really something that deserves praise. Calling it revolutionary like PSP Ridge Racer though, I don't know if I would go that far. I'm not sure if that can be really compared. Revolutionary would mean that some totally crazy shit that hasn't been seen before is going on here, and while the game really does look great, the car models especially, it's more so something remarkable rather than revolutionary, if that makes sense. Something like the game running at 60 FPS with slightly downgraded visuals, or the game running at a locked 30 at the handheld's 960 by 544 max resolution, would have pushed it a little more to that level. However, the game on a visual standpoint is still of high quality in my eyes, and it deserves its praise there. Secondly, the gameplay, and it's that it was brought over perfectly to the PS Vita. The moment-to-moment gameplay is about as fun as it always has been since Ridge Racer on the PSP. If you're not familiar with how its gameplay works, I already explained how it worked earlier on Ridge Racer PSP, so I won't go over it in detail here since it's kind of the same thing. But know that the same praises I gave to that game apply here as well. One difference here though is that the nitro system works slightly different. It's the same 3 bottles where you can choose to make use of one at a time, and you can also fill multiple bottles, but in Ridge Racer Vita, as you progress, you get to use all the bottles at once in order to get a stronger, longer duration boost. 2 for an increased boost, and 3 for the highest speed with the highest duration. Setting up for this takes time, but that means that you go at the highest speeds possible for a longer amount of time in one go. Besides that, you also have slipstreaming, which you can do by getting behind another car. It gives you a speed boost that's not quite as strong as Nitrous in terms of power, but it's strong enough to ensure that it can overtake some opponents. In short, drift through corners at extremely high speeds, slipstream whenever possible, build up your Nitrous, and outspeed the competition as much as you can. It's all great fun and there's no complaints there. Last but not least, we have the music, and in standard Ridge Racer fashion, it's awesome. You know it's good stuff when a song always makes you feel like you're going faster than what you actually are. It doesn't have as many songs as previous games, which we will definitely get to later, but what's here is great stuff. I'll take a minute to show you some of my favorites. And that's it for the good stuff. And I hope that you enjoyed it, because from here on, everything just gets worse.
Slide through the curves.
The first thing that I'll trash on is progression, and it's that in this game it might as well not exist. In Ridge Racer Vita, no joke, the only thing that you can work up to is car upgrades. That's it. You earn credits at a pitifully slow rate, 110 per race if you get first, which means every 10 races you get 1,100 credits, which amounts to a total of 2 upgrades that you can apply. Except it's not that simple. Here is the upgrade screen, where it really feels like everybody just gave up. Here, the way it works is that there are blocks, which are called kits, that are placed in such a way that it works kinda like a skill tree. You have a center path, a bottom path, and a top path, which translate to Group A, Group B, and Group C. You can have 1 upgrade applied per group, which means that you can have 3 upgrades at a time to your car. That's fine, and the few upgrades that I managed to purchase aren't even an issue, as they are fun to play around with. The problem I actually have with this system is the damn kits. I kid you not, there are kits that you buy that only have tips in them, and they cost as much as the ones with actual performance enhancing upgrades. And the funny thing is that they're not even tips a lot of the time, they're kinda just dialogue boxes. The first tip block you buy is literally just a text saying, "Oh, we'll make your car super good," or some shit. Like, really? But at least that's something, in a pretty loose sense, but it's not like you're paying upgrade money for blocks that genuinely have nothing in them. Oh man. Yeah, in by far one of the dumbest things I've ever seen, there are blocks in the upgrade screen that genuinely have nothing. Not even a tip to mask that there's genuinely nothing of value. They didn't even try, just boom, nothing. Like, huh? Why have me play 4 races to quite literally get nothing out of it? They're important because the no-kit blocks let you progress in the upgrade screen and buy the next upgrade in that group, but why not just make those upgrades themselves slightly more expensive? That would have been a lot better and would have made a lot more sense than a nothing block. Like, this isn't something that makes the game unplayable by itself, but it's something that in concept just pisses me off, and regardless of it not ruining the game, definitely makes upgrading much less satisfying because you quite literally pay in-game credits for nothing in exchange, and I mean literally nothing. It just wastes your time, it's really stupid, and it really drags out the progress of unlocking more upgrades, to the point where by the end of me obtaining my footage, I wasn't anywhere close to unlocking them all. Besides that, your cars can get faster, but they're locked behind leveling up, which you do by racing a lot. I've done more than 50 races and I'm still not at max level. Which gets me to the next point, and it's that this game doesn't have a campaign. You have time attacks and spot races, which are basically just normal races. You can race against ghosts and people online, and yeah, that's all you got. Which is not good. But hey, some games like Gran Turismo on the PSP have similar issues of no campaign and not that many modes, but it had over 800 cars and over 40 tracks. Now don't get me wrong, the lack of a campaign even while having that much content is a really bad exclusion, but the amount of content available and the fact that you still had to buy your cars still gave you something to work toward, and a lot of content to experience. To the point where just playing the game and doing your own races, while not ideal, definitely made it easier to stomach, because through the sheer volume of content you could make a lot of variation for yourself. I understand that Ridge Racer on the Vita wouldn't get close to Gran Turismo's amount of content, but if it had about as much or a little more than Ridge Racer on the PSP, it would be at the very least serviceable. So, what did we get? We didn't even get double digits. Double digits in what, you may ask? Cars or racetracks? And the answer is pretty funny. It's both combined. Ridge Racer Vita on release had a staggering 5 cars and 3, count them, 3 tracks. Not 30, not 13, 3. Actually, the game does have 2 unlockable cars that are only unlockable by racing against someone online who has something called Devil Mode activated, or by racing against a ghost who has it activated as well. And the online is still operational, so it's technically possible, but good luck finding anyone in this fucking ghost town. And the method of racing against someone's ghost that has it active is unreliable because there's no way for you to tell who has it activated. I didn't unlock it, but it's a stupid unlockable anyway, even if it's the only one. Regardless of its existence, it doesn't fix anything regarding the lack of content, especially given its asinine unlock method, so we'll just skip over it. I could ask many questions based on the amount of content alone. Why does this game have as many tracks as Daytona USA, a 1993 arcade game? Why does this game have fewer tracks than Sega Rally, a 1994 arcade game? Why does Sonic R have more content than this game in general? It's Sonic R, for God's sake! Okay, I know that content isn't everything because games like Daytona USA and Sega Rally are amazing while having a similar number of tracks. But the difference that really pushes those games to a level that Ridge Racer Vita doesn't achieve is the fact that they had a more punishing learning curve at first. That really does make it more addicting to play and get better at. They were easy to pick up and play, but actually winning in them did take a good amount of learning if you were playing it for the first time. Even if you're more used to it, it does take a good level of awareness and knowledge in order to come out with a first place. It also helps that they're also early to mid 90s arcade racing games. They definitely get a pass when they were first developed for a completely different space more than 20 years ago, but even with all the time that has since passed, the learning curve still remains, and those games also had infinitely more charm as well. Which is to say that more went into its racing due to the learning curve it had, but they also had a much cooler style and vibe. Now, to make a comparison to Ridge Racer Type 4, the series' most acclaimed game and one of the ones that I actually have played. I know that it had 8 tracks, just one more than Ridge Racer Vita when you count the DLC, but that game made stuff count by making full use of it in its campaign, which wasn't long, but gave you a nice choice of selectable difficulties tied to manufacturers, raising things with different backstories. They had nicely done dialogue as well, with stories that on the whole were small, but had very nice payoffs by the end. It didn't have the most content, specifically tracks, even at the time, but it made great use of what it had through its campaign, all wrapped up with the incredible visual design and music that is still talked about to this day, and ended up being a legendary game in the end despite it being a naturally short experience. But the difference is that Ridge Racer Type 4 tried, succeeded, and went above and beyond in many aspects to make it a lot more memorable. And Ridge Racer on the Vita kind of just didn't try anything while having even less than Type 4 did, when Type 4 was a PS1 game from 1998. It really boggles the mind how they didn't wait longer to release the game with more content offerings. I guess they desperately wanted to meet the launch window, but if this was the compromise they had to make, it really wasn't worth it. 3 tracks and 5 cards is an unacceptably low amount of content, and the game did not really do anything noteworthy with the low amount of content it had. You just raced at your own leisure with no career path to follow, just racing on one of 3 tracks and sometimes upgrading your car, which to say the least doesn't sound like the most interesting offer. It was an extremely underwhelming showing, especially given how PSP's Ridge Racer had a full-on campaign with a lot more content while also being a launch title, mind you. So there's really no excuse for this. Oh yeah, when comparing the content offerings between Ridge Racer Vita and older arcade games, I mentioned DLC. That's because Ridge Racer Vita got updates which expanded the game's content through paid DLC. Yeah, that was a terrible idea. For what it's worth, the new content I'd actually consider pretty good. You get 4 extra tracks and around 10 additional cars, one of them being the Hornet from Daytona USA. It handles like shit, but it's a cute reference, so I'll take it. The tracks are definitely a highlight though. They make playing the game a lot less repetitive by virtue of not always going the same 3 tracks the whole time. The new cars are a nice addition as well. Just like the base game, the cars look pretty slick and make the repetitive chore that is playing this game a little bit more bearable. Lastly, there's also a ton of extra music tracks, going up to 97 selectable songs in the game when all is factored in. They went so hard on the song selection, I wish they'd have done the same for basically everything else. It's basically a best of music compilation when it all gets added, and Ridge Racer music is totally amazing, so I would say that it's a success. The highlight in terms of music for me would be the Ridge Racer USA add-on though, which features Takenobu Mitsuyoshi, the vocalist from Daytona USA. These two IPs were actually rivals back then, so them joining forces at all is bigger than it might initially seem. All in all, I'd say that the DLC actually makes the game a lot more bearable to experience, though not because of the extra music or even cars, but because races not feeling as substantial as they could be due to an immediately easy feeling difficulty makes the prospect of racing through the base game's 3 tracks really boring. The AI is very easy to outrun, so most races end up being comfortable coasts toward the finish line more than anything. The lack of any meaningful difficulty really does hurt this game because of its extreme lack of variation. An easy game would be better to experience if at least there was more to do, like at least having more tracks to race on or a more elaborate campaign, but despite the DLC improving this game's repertoire of content, the game still doesn't offer either of those things. And when you actually factor in that you have to pay extra for all of this content, it turns from an unimpressive content offering to a downright scummy move from Bandai Namco's part, supplying the game with an unacceptably low volume of content and only offering to increase it if you shelled out more money to them. I'd call it borderline malicious by that point, and I think so would a lot of others. Funny thing is that even if it does improve the game, you're still not getting your money's worth at all. In fact, I would say that you're getting ripped off completely, as there's definitely much better than you can get, especially nowadays, with the same amount of money that Ridge Racer Vita plus its DLC costs. I'll have on screen other racing games that you can get on the Vita with that money, and it will probably be an embarrassing comparison. What's also embarrassing is that Sega Rally and Daytona USA feature less content when you factor in all of the DLC Ridge Racer Vita was given, but the fact that there was more of a learning curve to those games, that the AI is actually a bit of a challenge to keep up with, means that racing is literally just more engaging. And this isn't me at all knocking Daytona and Sega Rally because those games are awesome. But that doesn't change the fact that from Ridge Racer Vita it's a very disappointing showing, especially because those games were made for arcades on the early 90s. From the go, they were bound to have less content, and Ridge Racer Vita outdoes them in that aspect by just a tiny bit and is behind in just about every other aspect. The most unfortunate thing is that even with the list of problems that I've complained about, even with all of my whining, when I play this, the base for a good game is totally present, and I think people that have played Ridge Racer Vita can agree with this take. The actual moment-to-moment driving, perfectly translated to the Vita, is as fun as it always has been. The music, excellent. The visuals, great. Where they screwed up was the content offerings, and I mean, it really doomed this game. I understand how not having that much content doesn't need to be a deal breaker, as games with less are still praised and loved today, but Ridge Racer Vita doesn't have an ace up its sleeve like other games do. It just exists. The cars get faster over time, so you do need to get used to that every so often, but the AI never feels like it's increasing its difficulty. Even something like a Grand Prix mode that puts all the courses in a row and you gotta get the most points against AI that's actually challenging would have been a fantastic addition. Something, anything. But with how it is, you just do as many races as you like, and that's it. And for some, that could be enough, and I get it. Because as much as I'm trashing on the game due to its lack of content, and deservedly so, the moment-to-moment gameplay is still Ridge Racer. It's still awesome and it's still loads of fun. As I said, they nailed the hardest part. And as much as I criticize this game for its shortcoming, when you're actually in there racing, it's fun. It's really fun. And that's kind of ridiculous. They did the gameplay just right, but messed up the degree of content you had available, so much so to the point where the experience really did get negatively affected. And it's sad because it didn't have to be this way. And given the lack of content, it's warranted to a certain point. The degree of available content just isn't enough, and while I understand having a smaller scale game, this felt less than smaller scale. It felt like less than the bare minimum in terms of content. Like, again, the base game is 5 cars and 3 tracks, and the DLC only brings that up by a little. And that is a huge shame for a franchise that never really had that problem in their previous outings, especially on portables. But the reason why I said that it's warranted to a certain extent is because the little that the game did, it did do really well. The racing was fun, the music was awesome, the visuals were impressive. It had the baseline of a great addition to the series and you feel it when you play it. But they weren't able to develop it far enough to make things really worthwhile. The idea of having post-launch support would have been good, but not only was it not enough, it was also just paid DLC. And as for nowadays, the game's not fondly remembered whatsoever, and even with its lack of content, it's $20 on the PSN store, which is... The servers are still up, I think, so theoretically you can still play online races, but good luck finding a match. As it stands, Ridge Racer on the PS Vita is a baffling game to me because of how it got the hardest things, the gameplay, right, but the most basic aspects so wrong. It had great driving mechanics, great visuals, and awesome music, but had little content in general, and instead of trying its best to make its content as gripping as it could possibly be, it really just felt like a small fraction of a game that was meant to be bigger. And that sucks. This was the last mainline Ridge Racer we get for 13 years and counting. Recently, Ridge Racer's back with the first home console port of the first game's arcade version, and I really hope that this port reignites interest in the franchise from Namco's part. I can hope. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There's some stuff I didn't tackle like the devil mode, but it's really just an extra 2 races to unlock 2 cars. And again, the only way of getting this is by getting lucky online, so I really didn't feel like doing it. This video's ending is a bit of a downer, but I want to make it nicer by saying that Ridge Racer is special, even for someone like me who has only played a few of the games and hasn't gone into the franchise in full yet. The reason why Ridge Racer Vita is as baffling as it is because previous entries really are incredible. Even the original arcade Ridge Racer is still worth playing today, just like the other games I brought up here. And if any of you want to see me tackle Ridge Racer as a franchise, you can let me know by liking this video and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Hell, maybe I could make my way through the franchise in reverse, from Ridge Racer Vita all the way to the first one in arcades, which would be irregular, but I don't know, maybe it'd be fun. That marks the end for this video though, and I hope you enjoyed it. As always, any feedback you could leave down in the comments is encouraged and appreciated. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.